So I'm the head of the Child and Youth Department at the Center ÜBERLEBEN. Just to translate, ÜBERLEBEN translates to survive. Doesn't sound so good in English, it does in German. And yeah, so I'm specialized cognitive behavioral therapist for my background and also a trauma therapist. And I've been running the department since 2011. So the Center ÜBERLEBEN is a non-profit, big international and national active organization that works with victims of violence and torture, so refugees and migrants of all ages. What we do is we offer a variety of programs, basically starting with psychological, psychotherapeutic and psychiatric help, and paving or trying to pave the way into reintegration in a work and school environment. It's quite a big institution, so it has been founded in 1992 as the Center for Torture Victims. So back then it was only dedicated for the treatment and rehabilitation for victims of torture. And over the years it has evolved into quite a big organization with many different departments offering work to around 150 people. So it's quite big. So here you see all the different departments. Some of them are dedicated to rehabilitation and integration, and some more for research and documentation. So I will be talking about my department, the Department for Children and Adolescents. We're the only department working with minors. All the rest of the center is dedicated to work with people above the age of 21. So what might be interesting for you is, from all these departments, except mine of course, is the special library, which is a big library that is housing all kinds of, or anything, publications to do with migration, refugees, human rights, torture, documentation of torture. And of course it has a lot of international publications as well, so a lot of things in English. And our librarian is also quite helpful in English, so that might be interesting. Yeah. So to give an idea about the center, the size of the center and how we actually work, here a graphic about our budget in 2017. So it changes from year to year. We're non-profit, as I said. So in 2017, the finances, the income was 8 million euros. So our biggest recompense or our biggest funding comes from medical and therapeutical services. So we work together with German health insurance companies and German health social services. Then we get public funding from the federation, so from the country of Germany, and also big funding from the state of Berlin. But we are also still quite dependent to donations, to projects, to any kinds of other non-public funders. So it's always a bit of a struggle. Yeah. But yeah, we're trying our best to be able to treat the patients that we have. Okay, so the Child and Youth Department has been founded in 2000 as an appendage of the Adult Department. Back then it was only one psychotherapist and one social worker working there together. So in the Adult Department that had been existed for a while, the practitioners realized all these people that they're treating tend to have many children who also seem to be in need of help, and that's why the Child and Youth Department was founded. And then it worked like that. It was non-funded at the time. It was all through projects and donations, and it worked like that for around 10 years until times changed and funding was difficult, so we started from scratch in 2011. And back then it was only one psychotherapist and two psychotherapists, me and a colleague. And we had no social worker due to the lack of funding back then. So we were trying to do trauma therapy, but we realized that the kind of work that we are doing, the kind of therapy that we're offering with traumatized refugee kids is quite hard and sometimes even impossible without the support in the psychosocial sector, without the support of a social worker. So we found ourselves going through all kinds of legal questions and finding out about housing and social security while offering very little trauma therapy. So that was quite frustrating. And we wrote a couple of grants and finally succeeded. And in 2012, a social worker was able to join our team. And we could work. So until we still had very, very little capacities, but at least the kind of work we were offering, we were able to do. And then until 2015, you all know a lot of migrants reached Europe and high numbers, especially Germany. And the authorities of Berlin were utterly unprepared for the situation, which, the situation was to be expected, but they were utterly unprepared. So just to give an idea, so this was just right outside our building, right outside our office. So my therapy room is here, basically, in 2015, in autumn. So this was already in autumn. In summer, it was a lot more unorganized and a lot more chaotic than this. And because we are across the lawn from the central registration office in Berlin, which is right here, so everybody had to come to this compound. And we were right in the middle of it. So at the time, we were the only institution in Berlin, and also there is very few others in Germany that are specialized explicitly to the treatment of traumatized refugee kids. And so back then we were 3 people, and that definitely wasn't enough. And we found ourselves getting questions from all sides, to counsel colleagues, to counsel mental health clinic, to counsel state agencies. We gave classes for teachers that worked with refugee kids for the first time. And all the way still trying to actually give or provide as much trauma therapy and social work as possible. So that was intense times. And then through all the media attention, we finally had a private donor in 2015 who provided us with the possibility to actually employ more therapists, social workers, as well as 1 psychiatrist. So from back then until today, we were a team of 7, which is still small, but I think in Germany at least we are the biggest department dedicated only to the work with minors. So there needs to be more people doing this. And then in 2017, we established a new contract with the Senate of Berlin to be able to actually provide state-funded social work. So the thing is that our psychotherapies, we work together with health insurances in Germany. So we get a kind of like a refunding. We are able to refund big parts of the therapies, but social work is always dependent on projects, on private funding. So that was quite a success. So we do that now. So that's in cooperation with German Child and Youth Welfare Services. Now the team of psychotherapists therefore has to be all state-approved psychotherapists. So that has to do with the German system. And right now what we're doing is we work on a intercultural skill training as well as a parent counseling group, an intercultural parent counseling group, to also work better together with families, because we find that quite difficult. So we work a lot with unaccompanied minors that are embedded in the German help system, in the German child and youth welfare system, and the kids that come with families we find a lot more difficult to access. So we came up with these ideas. We are still trying out, so we'll see how it goes. And of course, we continue to apply for funds and foundations. We hope to keep the team steady, or maybe even growing the way it is now. But it's always difficult. You all know that, I guess. And we still have a lot higher demand than our capacities can offer. So the children that we work with are children from refugee families and unaccompanied minors, usually who have experienced torture or war-related violence and are suffering from trauma-related disorder, the majority actually with post-traumatic stress disorder. And in usually complex PTSD. That's the majority of the kids with symptoms, depending on the age, of course. So in smaller kids, we see a lot of other trauma-related anxiety disorders, mood disorders, excretory disorders. I hope that's the right word. I wasn't sure. Enuresis and never mind. So sorry about that. Yeah. So it's a wide range, but usually the kids that we are seeing have trauma-related disorders, and what we offer is trauma therapy. So to give an idea about the numbers I'm talking about, because I know that they're quite different from the numbers in the UK or in Ireland. So this is unfortunately everything that I found is in German, but so important is what I circled here. This is a graphic that shows the pleas for asylum. This is all of them. This is actually male, and this is female, and this is the age. And because of the age, it's important because it's really difficult to find numbers. Actually, how many kids, how many minors are entering the country, how many are accompanied, how many are unaccompanied, it's quite difficult. So this gives an idea of, for the time of January to August 2018. So all of them together, it's around 54,000 minors, but this is only pleas for asylum. So this is not all of them, but it gives an idea. And it also, like, if you look a bit further down up to here, so the majority of the people that are filing for asylum are actually under 30 years of age. So not all of the minors, but there's a really big group, minors, and a really, really big group between 18 and 25, which usually get very bad support because they're part of the adult system, so they don't get as good a support as minors. And we can't really treat them anymore. Child and Youth Services is not responsible anymore, but they are often have the needs of actually 18, 19, 20-year-olds have more the needs like 17, 18-year-olds than 35-year-olds. So that's a difficult group. We're trying to come up with projects and ideas to actually offer better services for them. And this is the pleas of asylum for unaccompanied minors. In 2017, also unfortunately in German, but it has nice pictures, so I thought I can use it. So, yeah, because this one shows you that the majority of them is between 16 and 17. The majority is actually male, and the main countries of origin are Afghanistan, Eritrea, Somalia, Guinea, and Syria. And the number in 2017 of unaccompanied minors filing for asylum was 9,000, around 9,000. So this is, it's still a big number, but it really isn't if you consider that in 2016 in Germany it was around 44,000 minors being taken into custody by the German government, by the German officials. So the numbers have gone down dramatically. Of course, always pleas for asylum are not the exact numbers of people being there, but it gives you an idea how much the political situation in Germany, like everywhere else in Europe, has changed. And it's a lot less minors now coming into the country. But I'm talking about these two groups because this is the two groups that we're dealing with and that usually have quite different needs and backgrounds. And to give an idea, I brought two examples where I've changed the names and the countries of origin, of course, to keep confidentiality. And so the accompanied minors, this was Susan and Alima. They, for example, came to Germany together with their mother. They had lost the rest of their family in the Mediterranean Sea. And this was in 2016. They had left after bombardments and being repeatedly attacked in their hometown. Had seen terrible things, but also the mother, of course, was really burdened. And then the situation in Germany was quite burdensome as well. So Mina has talked about this, that it's not only the traumas on the way and in the home countries, but actually in the reception country are quite difficult to master. So in this case, they were, of course, in a collective housing collective housing for refugee families, which was difficult for a single mother. And also their plea for asylum at the point was quite unclear. So this is a whole lot of factors coming together that make the situation quite difficult. At the camps, at the housing facilities, there's usually social workers, especially in 2016. They were quite overwhelmed with the situation. They did call us, so they did that. But they couldn't offer the support that was needed for the family. So that would have been legal consultation, would have been a great help. Some support, psychological support, counseling for the mother, counseling for administrative procedures. All these things would have already helped the two girls quite a lot, and then also to improve the school situation. And the whole family was suffering from anxiety, from sleeping disorders, and from trauma-related problems. So in this example, you see the special problems, the special facts for accompanied minors that are usually in the asylum procedure with their families. So they are actually affected by, for example, deportations within the Dublin III agreement, which unaccompanied minors are not. Which is usually quite burdensome for the whole family. They are accommodated in the collecting housing facilities that are usually not quite ideal for children, nor do they usually respect the laws for child protection. So especially in 2016, there have been quite a lot of incidents that would have been easily to prevent with bathrooms that are able to lock, or rooms for only mothers with little children instead of having them in big dormitories with single men. So problems like this, right? They have to deal with usually a whole system of a traumatized family with severely traumatized parents or siblings. So we're dealing with transgenerational transmission of trauma, And that is due to the German system. They are less embedded in the help systems because they receive medical care after different laws than unaccompanied minors, because they are there with their families, and that's poorer medical care. So it's a lot more difficult to access the mental health care system, for example. And they are not automatically embedded in the child and youth welfare services. But we do see less complex disorders with accompanied minors, which has to do with a lot of factors, but also shorter escape routes, and of course they are in a supportive network with their families usually. And to make it more clear, I brought this unaccompanied minor, which was 16-year-old Khaled, who we saw in our outpatient psychotherapy, had been accompanied to us with a caregiver. He had arrived only recently in Germany when we met him, and he had come to the country without members of his family, without any guardian or adult family members. And he lived in a supervised shared flat of youth welfare services. That's how it works. If everything goes the way it should, the kids are taken into custody and are living in special institutions. And if they're lucky, they live in a special institution that is actually specialized for refugee kids, not only for kids in custody. At the time, it was still unclear what he's been through, but he suffered from sleep disorders, nightmares, uncontrollable memories, and was often flooded by the pictures from his home country and the experiences on the way to Europe, actually, which had been quite long. It was, I think, almost 2 years that he was on the road. And the problem with him was that he was not only withdrawing to his room and being really sad, but he also would have outbursts of anger. He would hurt himself or threaten with suicide. And he had really often arguments in his institution where he lived. He had already changed the institution, had to change because it wasn't working in the institution before, and also in school there was a lot of problems. So, that's a typical example for the unaccompanied minors that we are seeing, and also gives an idea for the problems they are facing. So of course they usually have either lost their families or they have no contact with their families. Sometimes they actually they actually find their families. It happened a couple of times to me. The patients found their families actually not with the Red Cross or anything, what we're trying to do, but via Facebook and social media. And so they are not inside the social support system, but they are embedded in the German Child and Youth Welfare Services, which is a different kind of, very different kind of support, but it is a support. If they're unlucky, they have to face quite burdensome age assessment procedures. So this means when the authorities doubt that they are actually minors, and they have to go through these procedures, which have both psychological impacts, they're not being believed, and also the procedures are quite terrible because it's not only psychological assessment but also physical. And it has, of course, far-reaching legal implications because if they are supposed to be not minors, then everything switches and they enter the adult system, the adult social system, which is a lot less good, and yes, it has an impact on the asylum procedure as well, of course. So the majority of unaccompanied minors have traumatic experiences or experiences of war and torture, and significantly more so than accompanied minors. And again, Nina has already talked about this, they have high prevalences of PTSD. So the kids that we are seeing usually have really long, as I said, sometimes up to several years escape routes, and it's not only the things that happened to them in their home countries why they were leaving in the first place, but also what they've been through on these escape routes. So, yeah. And, so the Child and Youth Department has specialized in working with these kids. And, of course, as I said earlier, we have our capacities are quite small still. So we had to come up with some kind of admission process that is both fair but still kind of efficient. So this is how you get into our program, basically. We have a phone contact, so that's a phone consultation hour once weekly. And we try to do a good clearing, a good assessment already in this phone contact. And then from the people that have called, we try to identify those with the highest needs, or the seemingly highest needs, because of course it's via phone. And then we invite several kids to diagnostic sessions. So I'm aware we're not a low threshold offer, right? You do need help somehow to get to us. But then it's kind of always like that. If you work with child and adolescents, they do need help finding a way into the system. And we're quite known with inside the communities. We're quite known for institutions that work with minor refugee kids, or for mental health services in the city, and also for child and youth welfare services. So we have good connection with them. We then see the kids to up to 3 diagnostic sessions where we try to do a good assessment of the symptoms, of the background, and also the current living situation. So it's not only psychological assessment, but it's also psychosocial assessment, because we learned that this is very important for the outcome of the treatment, actually, or also for the motivation to find a base to be actually working on. After these diagnostic sessions, the practitioners that have seen the kids will give a case presentation in the team, and we come up with a treatment plan. So that treatment plan, of course, is according to indication and needs. It can always be further diagnostic, so we're going to just see a little longer, do more assessments. And then we have the 3 disciplines of psychiatry, psychotherapy, and social work, where we decide which of them, all of them, or only which of them will be part of the treatment plan, and either in high frequency or low frequency. High frequency means 1 to twice a week. That will be usually psychotherapy, so trauma-focused psychotherapy. And low frequency means 1 to 3 times per quarter of the year. That has to do with the German health insurance system. And then we offer a group It's kind of a skill group that is based on physical experience, and we have different kinds of activities. So that depends. We have some activities that are quite regular. For example, we have this group of teenagers that come together and cook together simply in the department with one of our social workers, but then always depending on the funding and the projects we have at the moment. We just received funding for a workshop in, it's going to probably be in spring vacation. That's going to be a video workshop, a storytelling workshop. So we do stuff like that, and we have a foundation that's been supporting us for a couple of years now, that we can offer a summer trip with the kids, which is usually, for most of them, the first time they ever go on vacation. It's only a really nice summer camp in Brandenburg, close to Berlin, but it's really beautiful by a lake, and it's for most of the kids, it's quite an experience, and helpful for therapy also. So. And how we are able to offer all this is because we work with a multi-professional approach. And that is really something we learned over the years, as I said, that this is what this specific target group actually needs. So we are a team of 4 licensed child and youth psychotherapists and 1 psychiatrist, who's also a therapist, so 4 therapists. He also does a little bit of trauma therapy. And we are offering in an outpatient setting trauma-focused psychotherapy. So we're both cognitive behavioral therapists and psychodynamic colleagues, but since most of us actually have an additional trauma education, I would say that the way we're working is quite interdisciplinary between the different psychotherapy schools. And part of the treatment always is, and that overlooks usually the therapist, is to induce any kind of further psychosocial help that can be either in the department with our social workers or through external help systems. And then, of course, we work with the network, with the families, with the teachers, with the lawyers, and whenever it's necessary to write some kind of report, we're usually involved in the asylum process, which is difficult for both patients and practitioners, because we have this weird role of writing the reports for the process, and that's difficult sometimes for the relationship in the beginning of the therapy, but we have to do it, and usually it's helpful for the asylum process. Then we have our medical colleague, the child and youth psychotherapist, who offers medical support whenever it's necessary, but usually together with psychotherapy. So we have no patients that are only seeing psychiatrics. There will always be a social worker at least assigned to the case. And we have 2 social workers. They offer psychosocial counseling, and especially in the beginning of the treatment, it's always quite important to have a look at the asylum process. And they go through that with the families, with the caretakers, if it's unaccompanied minors. We have the possibility, there's a lawyer in the center, not in our department, but in the center, every other week, and so we can refer there for legal counseling, but also there is other external institutions that we can refer to, which is also, it's an important part of our work. So we're still a small team, but child and youth welfare services offer some kind of supportive help. The cooperation is not always easy. It may sound all a bit more ideal than it is now, but it works. There is programs. There is a lot of other non-profit organizations having worked in this context for a while. So we try to network quite well and use whatever is there and work together. And we have a team of cultural brokers also. So we always, usually in the beginning of the treatment, we work with cultural brokers. And a lot of the kids actually learn German quite fast. They go to school. Some don't, but with the work with the families, we usually need the cultural brokers until the end. So I've already explained that when we work, it's always teamwork. So every kid that is seen is always seen by at least 2 members of the team of usually different professional background. So that is in most cases, that's a therapist and a social worker. Also, the assessment in the beginning, the diagnostic sessions, at least one of the sessions is two professions together. And the case management lies usually with the psychotherapist or the psychiatrist, and that has to do with insurance reasons. So really important in how the department works is our team meeting that we have weekly. That is quite long, it's 2.5 hours. But we find it necessary, so of course we discuss organizational matters, but then a lot of patient-centered matters. That would be case presentation after practitioners have seen a kid in diagnostic sessions. So before we come up with a treatment plan, we discuss that together. Then we have regular presentations throughout the process. There is fixed point in therapy where there will be presentations, but also whenever there is difficult questions arising, we will discuss them in the team. We find it quite useful to have these different professions with different points of view, actually looking on the case and usually working with the case. So, and then also, of course, for the exchange between the professions working with that particular case. So this is quite an important part of our work, that we have a good exchange. We have a lot of sitting together and talking about the patients, but we found that necessary to be able to deal with these complex cases and to also be successful with our treatment. We have supervision with an external supervisor, also a child and youth specialist who is specialized in trauma therapy, who comes every other week. And whenever there is questions that are deeper than what we can discuss just between the two of us, or when there is difficult dynamics to be discussed, we take it into supervision. And we also established a multi-professional exchange with colleagues from a similar institution in Berlin. It's also a psychosocial center. These centers, like the Center ÜBERLEBEN, that's what they're called in Germany, psychosocial centers. But they only have 2 people on 50%, I think, working with minors. But so we sit with them together, and also sometimes when we offer talks or classes, we do it with them together to actually network well. So so this is how we find it's possible to actually work with these complex cases, as I said. So this is actually the lifeline from narrative exposure therapy that we are working a lot with, from the child soldier Khaled that I was talking about earlier. And so to give an idea how it goes in our department, he was admitted to outpatient psychotherapy with supported social work, in his case on a low frequency, because the institution he was living in was actually quite well adapted to the situation. And still the cooperation with the adolescent was really difficult at the beginning, and also at times with the institutions, because he tended to play the different caregivers, the different helpers, off against each other. So, which is something quite common, I guess, if you see in these complex PTSD or relationship disorders. And so it was really important. In this case, we were doing a therapy that was not in cooperation with child and youth welfare services, but simply mental health services. So we're not automatically part of the helping system. And if it's like that, if we're not automatically part of this child and youth welfare help system by being the ones doing the therapy within the system, then we still behave like it was the case. So we still just call everybody, invite everybody, get everybody on the table together, and discuss the case in the beginning and try to really organize who is doing what. So because in Germany there is the possibility that child and youth welfare services are actually inducing a psychotherapy, and we have a contract with them, so we can do that, and we are part of the helping system. But if we're not, if we're doing it through health insurances, we have to find a way for still good cooperation, and we found that it's really, really necessary to have that cooperation. So in the case of Khaled, that was crucial, and we could find good agreements, who is responsible of what, with the teachers, with the caregivers in the institutions. We could also support the caregivers in the institution because it was quite difficult for them to deal with the adolescent in the beginning especially. And he did get involved into psychotherapy slowly, and it was also quite important that the caregiver in the institution had support from different systems, because he then again was quite supportive for the therapy when we got into trauma therapy, when we got into exposure therapy, because then sometimes it's necessary to be able to call someone and say, can you pick him up today? It would be more safe to have like this kind of supportive network. So that was working well. And because Khaled, especially at the beginning, had violent impulse breakthroughs and self-injuring behavior, and was threatening regularly with suicide, and also had a lot of problems sleeping. So our medical colleague got involved in the case, and that was helping in the beginning. What took a lot of pressure from Khaled as well was good legal counseling concerning his asylum process, because often that's on the kids' minds. Like, I have to, like, why do I need therapy? They make me gonna leave again anyway soon. So it's really important to have good legal counseling, to find lawyers. There's a couple, not a lot, but a couple of special lawyers in Berlin that have specialized on working with minor refugee kids. So we also try to have good contact with them and spend a lot into networking. So through that treatment, he became increasingly stable, and like the success at the beginning also made him a lot more compliant in the due process. So I think cases like that make it clear that why we need this multi-professional approach and the team approach, because then we can actually work with these kids. It's hard for the practitioners and for the patients to go through this process. Yeah, so far I think there's still a lot to improve, but I think we're on the right way. And with that, I would thank you for your attention.